Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Ellen in tropical St. Bart, and today we welcome Executive Vice President of Design for the Lighting Design Group, Dennis Size.
And this is Stan in chilly Gainesville, Florida, and today we will be discussing the Olympics and the Super Bowl and broadcast lighting techniques from our resident expert.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Stevenson Ranch neighborhood of Valencia, California. That's right. California Institute of the Arts is right across the street. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers and Sister. Well, welcome everyone to episode 255. Wow, man, what a week this has been. First, we have the amazing Olympic opening ceremonies, which we covered at last week's show. Then we had the Olympics for 2 weeks, and we had the Super Bowl on Sunday, and now we have Emmy Award-winning lighting designer Dennis Size from the Lighting Design Group on the show to tell us how he survived it all. So Dennis, welcome to Light Talk.
Oh, thank you very, very much. This is such a thrill. I mean, people ask me, hey, what was your favorite show? What do you enjoy doing? Who was the best person you ever worked with? All of these things. And in almost 50 years of doing this, I can now say the high point of my life was Light Talk.
Oh, my God.
This is a statement.
Yes, even better than Sammy Davis Jr. Oh, my God.
You know, it's funny. I'm not a podcast person. I never listened to podcasts. And about a little over a year ago, I did a podcast with our mutual friend, Ethan Steinmail, for his artistic finance. And I know all you guys have done that. Right. And he was talking about it. And just to hear what it was all about, I listened to some prior shows. And that's when I heard the interview that Steve did and the interview Stan did. And I said, I got to listen to this Light Talk. And because of the pandemic, I started listening to podcasts. And I'm telling you, it was like I discovered crack.
You got hooked. You're hooked.
And because,
you got hooked on Light Talk.
That's right. And you know what? So many jobs I was doing happened to take me outside Manhattan, driving to do home studios in the metropolitan area. So sometimes I'd be driving for like an hour and a half or 2 hours. And what better thing to do than to listen to your podcast? And it became my go-to thing. And, you know,
you're still sane? I don't understand.
You know, you guys always say that. And David, I know, is always putting down the podcast. But it's really goddamn, can't say that.
That's right.
It's really incredible what you guys do. And I'm telling you, you should be honored. Everybody that listens should be honored knowing that you're doing this. It's a wonderful thing you guys do. Wow. I know you're heard in like 4 million countries across the globe. You know,
Antarctica.
It's funny. A couple months ago, remember when SpaceX launched?
Oh, yeah.
Big SpaceX thing?
Oh, yeah.
I was doing a special event broadcast at one of the networks. And when I was in the control room, I heard something in the background on my headset. I couldn't quite tell what it was. So I went into the audio room and I said, hey, can you guys pump up the volume? I'm hearing something back there. I can't tell what it is. Can you guys hear it? And the audio guy said, it sounds to me like the sounds of a Hammond B3. And I said, what? Pump it up some more. And sure enough, the astronauts were listening to Light Talk.
Oh, I swear. Now this is fantastic.
You guys are in outer space.
We are in outer space.
You realize that in 4.5 hours, your words will be going past the planet Pluto. You're out there with Voyager making first contact.
You know what, Steve? I love you. I mean, you guys, I do a lot of shows. I've done a lot of talk shows. I've done a lot of morning shows. There's something that makes a show successful. And the big thing is the chemistry between all the hosts. And the three of you have some kind of chemistry that is just purely special.
Wait, now I'm questioning his math.
It's actually not chemistry, but mostly alcohol, I believe it is. Maybe that's the chemistry.
And I feel honored today that there's the Lumen quadrangle, shall we call it, with four of you. But I tell you, I fell in love with the show, and I think I've now heard just about every single show, except this past Saturdays, because I was a little bit busy.
We talk about you on that show, by the way.
Oh, really?
You are, yes. Your ears should be buzzing.
Okay, well, they were buzzing, but it wasn't because of you.
Yeah, right. It had to do with
Well, Dr. Dre's a big fan, too.
When I was in college, I was a real fan of Fireside Theater. Remember Fireside Theater?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah.
And when I started listening to you guys, I said, this is like Fireside Theater for lighting, for broadcast, for
I
television.
guess we were trying to do light car talk, but I guess Fireside Theater is good too.
Well, I'd have to know what car talk is to know if you've succeeded.
Oh, okay. Well,
Again, you are the primo podcast. I don't listen to anybody else except Ethan.
Wow.
thank you. I mean, you're our number.
Anyway.
I have to push my head down now.
Anyway,
We are the number one
We are
podcast in
number
the
one
Faroe
in the
Islands,
Faroe Islands.
in regards to
Faroe Islands.
theatrical
All
lighting.
three listeners.
About it.
you know, it was a funny show when you announced that and that nobody knew where the Faroe Islands was.
Right.
And I'm saying,
We didn't know where it
what the
was.
hell is wrong with you guys? You don't know where the Faroe Islands are? And that's one of the great things about your show. You'll be doing something, and I'll be in my car driving, and I'll say, damn it, David, what are you, an idiot? That's not the way it is. Stan is right. Or Steve is right. Or, and I'm yelling at my damn radio and serious in the car, carrying on this argument with you guys. And that's really great. You inspire
Well, I love that people have said that they feel like they're in the room with us. That's kind of that's a nice compliment.
It is. And you guys, I mean, I can't praise the show enough. And we've digressed totally off what we should be talking about.
Did you get the check? Did you get the check?
Yeah, he must have gotten the check because he's pontificating endlessly about how great we are. But
Right.
it's knowing this information about the Elon Musk and SpaceX and them listening to us out there, we are not only international, we are interplanetary.
There you go.
We are
Intergalactic.
intergalactical. We are the first intergalactical podcast. Thank you, Ellen. She's right. So thank you.
You know, of course, that we're all going to get a nasty letter from Elon Musk's lawyers.
Yeah, well, listen, I have a
cease and desist
Don't
letter,
get
right?
me started with Elon. I've got something going on there. Anyway, so let's get started.
Sounds good.
Before we get started, let's go ahead and Ellen, why don't you tell us a little bit about Dennis and the Lighting Design Group?
The Lighting Design Group is an award-winning broadcast television lighting design firm. Since 1989, numerous global television networks, celebrated television shows, theatrical productions, new media, and multinational corporations have turned to Lighting Design Group for its outstanding lighting design and exceptional lighting services. The firm specializes in broadcast studio design, exterior and remote location design, the installation of permanent broadcast lighting systems, and works in both webcasting and architectural settings. They have won multiple Emmy Awards for both design and team technical work. The company's credit list is endless, ranging from news studios for NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, and Fox, to the NBC coverage of the Olympic Games, to MTV studio productions, and webcasting venues for Vox Media and BuzzFeed. Examples of systems range from the CNN and Fox studios in New York to London and Hong Kong bureaus for Bloomberg News and major studios for CCTV in Beijing. LDG's employees include a cadre of top designers, craftspersons, gaffers, production, and office support staff led by President Stephen Brill. The team is expert in all phases of broadcast lighting, from studio construction to pre-production, through production to post-production. As Executive Vice President of Design, Dennis Size's design work has spanned continents. A small sample of his work includes designs for Disney, ABC, Buena Vista's Good Morning America, Oscar specials in LA, ABC News 2020 DNC presidential debates, 2016 RNC DNC presidential debates, the 2011 and 2018 royal weddings in London, the funeral of Pope John Paul at the Vatican, 1992 to 2020 election night specials, 1997 to 2017 presidential inaugurations, ABC World News Tonight, the RNC and DNC convention since 1992, Monday Night Football, Wide World of Sports, college football scoreboard for ABC Sports, several national ABC television shows where he won Emmys for All My Children and Ryan's Hope. For NBC, he designed the studios for the Today Show, the Olympics, and this never ends. Let's just say he has also designed for PBS, MSNBC, TV Guide Channel, Voice of America, American Enterprise Institute, the Council of Foreign Relations, WNET, CNN, Univision, Dick Clark Productions, Prospect Park, Fox News Channel, Fox Business Network, Fox Sports, Paramount Television, Telepictures, Oxygen Network, Nickelodeon, Lifetime, White House Briefing Room, CNN Sports, and the Republic of South Sudan. I wonder if we have any listeners over there.
We do. We have 4 in Sudan.
Are they still alive?
Yes, they're alive.
What this leaves out is the most recent work that Dennis and the Lighting Design Group did for NBC's broadcasts of the Winter Olympics in Beijing and Super Bowl 56. So, Dennis, tell us about your most recent projects. What did you do designing for the Super Bowl and the broadcast stages for the Olympics in Beijing?
Well,
or at least an hour
Is that
ago.
it? Is that it?
Well, first of all,
Is that
this
it?
is the
Only
first,
that's all?
This is the first guest we've had who actually designed for the Pope. So please, a moment of silence.
A moment of silence.
Also, what, 2 royal weddings? My God, Dennis. 2 royal weddings.
How was the food?
You can't see my fingers, but it's 3.
3 royal weddings. Oh, my
One
God.
of the very first
One
jobs
ended
I
in
had
divorce.
when I was on staff at ABC Network starting in 1979. And one of the very first jobs I had was in the news division, was the royal wedding of Charles and Diana in 1981.
Wow.
At that time, I was just a kid. I was babysitting the news studio where I think it was Peter Jennings may have been the moderator. And the only reason I remember it is years later, I went back to supervise all the broadcast lighting for ABC's coverage for the wedding of Harry and Meghan. And then several years later, for William and Kate. And then several years later for Harry and Meghan. And a friend of mine pointed out, said, do you know how many people can say they were involved with the coverage of 3 royal weddings? And it's really kind of funny because it's one of the great things about this business and how many different things you can do. I mean, I find that interesting, but I've also lit every single president since Ronald Reagan was president. And,
It's your fault.
It's funny when Ellen was reading that bio, and I think I might have dozed off. I'm not sure, but I'm sorry that I didn't really give you a bio. You had to kind of figure that out yourself. But when most people say, "What have you done?" or "What do you do?" I usually tell prospective clients that you cannot turn on your television at any time of the day or night and not see a Lighting Design Group show.
Wow.
It's impossible.
Wow.
I just launched a show in Chicago for Nexstar, which is the Nexstar Media Group, and they've started a new cable news network called News Nation. And they launched a new show called Morning in America. And they said, we hope you can make this look different from Good Morning America, which is another show that I designed. And I said, don't worry, I'll make it look different from that show, from the Today Show, from Fox and Friends, from Boomer and Geo, from the 5 other morning shows I've designed. And then when I looked at the television, I was like clicking through the mornings, and I didn't really realize, but LDG has designed 17 of the shows that are on television between 4 in the morning and 9 in the morning every day. I mean, it's one thing to read off the bio list, but you have to remember, pre-pandemic, we had 60 people on staff. I supervised the design division, which had 35 designers. So when you have 35 designers out there working, it's very easy to accumulate all those credits.
Wow.
Obviously, I'm not designing them all.
Wow.
But I'm just the guy that can't hold a job, so I go on from one job to another. No, I joke about it. I got the attention span of a gnat. So once I do a show, I'll turn it on over to one of our other designers, and then they run with it from there. And then I'm on to the next show. Otherwise, there's no way in hell that I could do that much.
Wow.
Even right now with the Super Bowl, I've got 10 other projects on my plate. I'm supervising the design, but several of our other designers are actually running with that ball. Anyway, that was the lead in to what Ellen's question was. And that was something to the effect of basically, what did you do for the Super Bowl? Essentially, this is the 4th Super Bowl that LDG has done, my 2nd. Usually the NBC sports stuff is done by the president of the company, Stephen Brill. But Steve also supervises the Olympics. So we did the Super Bowl in Minneapolis. Steve was off at the Olympics at that time, so I took it over and ran with it. We had a good time. The director liked me. The producer liked me. It was a good show. So once NBC had the next Super Bowl, which was this year, Steve was also supposed to be in Beijing, so they asked me to do the show. Now, what is the show? The reality is, it's easy to say it's an NBC, but it's not. You know, you're working for Comcast. And if you don't know how this situation works, Comcast owns a boatload of networks. So you're not just doing the NBC studio, you're doing NBC, you're doing Telemundo, you're doing MSNBC, you're doing CNBC, you're doing the USA Network, you're doing the NBC Sports Cable. I could go on and on. The Golf Channel. They own about 30 different networks. And don't forget, Comcast also owns Universal Pictures. They also own DreamWorks Animation. It's a host of things. So when we do something for the Olympics or the Super Bowl, there's many studios, because what happens is they bring all of their shows. The Super Bowl was Sunday night, but we actually started broadcasting the prior Sunday. We had stages at the Los Angeles Convention Center. One was at a thing called the NFL Experience, which, if you're unfamiliar with that, think theme park or World's Fair. Basically, the entire convention center was turned into a theme park for children and adults, where there were museum elements to it, like you could go and get a photo of your son or daughter with football players and mannequins wearing every single football outfit in the league. They also had Super Bowl rings. They also had full football fields where professional trainers would train you on how to throw a pass or how to tackle. It's really quite a spectacular thing. NBC covered that by having a stage there with the convention center in the background so you could see all this commotion and excitement. And they broadcast 3 shows from that stage every single day that aired on one of their brands. One of the shows was a show called Pro Football Talk. In the same complex at the Staples Center Convention Center was the Radio Row. And I sent my wife a photo of it, and she said, "What the hell is that? It looks like an immigration center." And that's kind of what it looks like. It's just hundreds of tables. And at those tables, there's people doing podcasts, radio shows, writing newspaper articles, that sort of thing. But NBC also chose to do shows there for Telemundo, CNBC, and I think NBC Sports. And we put a stage up there. Essentially, it's a little broadcast studio stage, but the whole background of the room shows the commotion and the excitement of everything that's going on there. There were other stages, such as at the Santa Monica Pier, at the very end of the pier, which goes out, I don't know, maybe half a mile out into the ocean. They broadcast from 9 a.m. through about 2 in the afternoon on the day before the Super Bowl and game day. And they had anchors there just to get a flavor of Los Angeles, get fun, get some commotion. Some of the other stages were around SoFi Stadium. On the lake outside SoFi Stadium, we had 2 major stages. One was the stage for the pre-game broadcast that was used specifically from 9 a.m. to kickoff at 1:30 Pacific Coast time. And then at night, that stage became the stage for the Olympic coverage, because at Beijing, they had cut everything back in a seriously large way. A year ago, when we were planning the Olympics, we had 40 people going to Beijing. In the fall, that was cut back to about 20 people. And at Christmas time, it was cut back to 15 people. And then right after New Year's, only about 12 of our people actually went. They didn't even send all the broadcasters. The director directed all the Olympic coverage from the Sports Network studios in Connecticut. So normally what we do at the Olympics is the small broadcast stations at every venue, where when somebody finishes their ski jump, there's lights and a talent anchor and a lighting director who's actually there covering that. None of that went on at Beijing. So basically, they decided to use their anchors at their Sports Center studio in Connecticut, and then also on some of the stages in Los Angeles. and the lake stage was one of those. There was other stages at the lake. There was a tailgate stage, which, if you're unfamiliar, there's huge parking lots all around the stadium, and they have parties. It's just celebrity parties where people pay a gazillion dollars to go in. Right next to us was a performance tent where the Chainsmokers were performing. And then you would get celebrities who would walk, who would see the show and then come over and be interviewed. Again, because the Comcast organization is going to promote their shows, they would have celebrities from like the new show they're doing, Endgame. So the leads of Endgame would go to the tailgate stage. They'd be interviewed about the show and then, give their opinions about football and who's going to win.
I don't know. There's something weird about using the tailgate name for like this commercial thing because, tailgating historically in football is when families arrive 2-3 hours early to the stadium and they all maybe they'll put up a barbecue and they'll cook up some burgers and things like that and get drunk and all that. Now you're talking about they had like events that you had to pay to get into.
Yep.
Yeah,
you had to pay major bucks. I mean, come on, let's face it. You saw what the ticket prices were to actually see the Super Bowl.
It was insane. Yeah.
I mean, we had one of our lighting positions, and one of my lighting directors was sitting in a seat on the sidelines that next to him, where his station, his broadcast monitor, his routing switcher was, next to him, the people sitting there paid $45,000 a seat.
My God.
I mean, really? Are you kidding me?
The game was good. It wasn't that good, but it was good.
But anyway, what we were doing, and there was about, I think we had 13 stages scattered all around Los Angeles to basically promote Los Angeles, to show off NBC's various shows, and to just do some fun coverage throughout the week. On the day of, I actually had a lighting director and gaffer that traveled all around Los Angeles to 5 different locations. They would go to Muscle Beach, Venice Beach. They went to the Coliseum. They went to Universal Studios. And basically, it was Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Rutledge Wood, the analyst. And they just tooled around in a blue sports coupe. And behind them was my LD and gaffer in a little grip truck. They would light it live when they got to the locations. And actually in the grip truck was a camera that showed the car in front of them as a follow car. And they did that in 5 or 6 locations just for fun, And then when they went to Universal Studios, they did it at the Jurassic Park pavilion that's there. And they interviewed Jeff Goldblum, who is part of the new movie that Universal's going to be releasing that just happens to be owned by Comcast.
Oh, man.
So, I mean, it's all one big tie-in.
Yeah.
In reality,
money, really, when you think about
there's 3 events that go on. There's this thing called a football game.
All right.
And we do Sunday night football for NBC. We do that every Sunday. One of our lighting directors travels every week. Wherever the game is, he sets up the field reporter stand-up positions and the booth, where you have Al Michaels and Chris Collingsworth. And then there's a little video wall behind him that he sets up. That's his job every week for 30 weeks, however long the season is. That is number 1 for the Super Bowl. And that LD comes and does that. But then number 2 is the pregame, postgame coverage, of which it's something like 6 hours live on game day. And that's where all of these stages are employed. And then there's all sorts of additional things that happen at the last minute. I try not to schedule myself at any of the stages because I need to be there when they throw a change or there's an important interview that pops up. For example, they were able to get an interview with the coach of the Rams, the winning coach. That just came up like that at the last minute. So we had to run down and myself and a gaffer with a couple of light panels to get that lit in the hallways of the stadium. Similarly, after the game, the Mike Tirico, who is their pregame lead announcer and anchorman, he was also, if you've seen the Olympic coverage, he's doing all the Olympic coverage, but he couldn't get out to the Olympic studio. He was stuck in the stadium. There were so many people. So we started doing the Olympic coverage on the field right after the trophy presentation. So it's myself and one of my other guys are running out to the field with lights to light that. So there's a lot of run and gun stuff over and above the actual studio stages, for lack of a better word. And just to give you an idea of that, that's why I sent you those light plots. So you can say, oh, there's a lot of crap that goes into
and
this.
I was just going to mention, and maybe you could discuss, all these different light plots, what makes them unique? Because if there are 5 or 6 stages, they're all in different locations. They all have different lighting requirements. And I was amazed at looking at some of the equipment choices you made, because you would have LED in on this stage. This stage you'd have arc.
Well, as I said, I did the Super Bowl in Minneapolis 3 years ago for NBC Sports. It was a much smaller scope of work for us because we didn't do the tailgate, we didn't do the parking lots. It was 20 degrees below zero, so they didn't have any of that in Minneapolis. And the NFL experience and the Radio Row stuff was done by the companies at the convention center. They wanted their people to do that. So all we did were the 4 or 5 stages that surrounded the stadium proper, and then a big stage we did in downtown Minneapolis. But where I got burned was by using conventional fixtures. There's a budget. Everybody's got to have a budget. So I was using essentially Fresnels and Licos and soft lights. This was 3 years ago. Some of them were LED, some were arc, some of them were actual tungsten fixtures. A lot of times you're at the you're stuck by whatever the rental house can provide for you.
This sounds familiar.
Sure. It's the same everywhere. But what I got burned by was the fact that you never get any instruction, and you never get really told how many people are going to be at each stage. You don't really understand how it's going to be shot. So I didn't give myself the ability to change very quickly. I found myself and the other LDs were forced to do a lot of last minute focusing, as the desk would go from 2 people to 4 people to 3 people to 5 people. And it's just very difficult with conventional fixtures. So when I went into this one, I said, okay, this is going to be all moving lights. I want to be able to have the ability for my LDs in each of these stages to change things rapidly and not have to pull a ladder out and refocus. That's what really drove the concept of all the movers that you saw. Now, some of the stages, like the main stage in the SoFi Stadium, it was very, very bright in there. I mean, we were probably up with the sun in the middle of the day, well over 1,000 foot candles. And they don't like to do neutral densities or scrims or anything like that. So we silked out our booth, but I needed some heavy firepower. The instrument of choice that you saw was the Elation Ellipse, only because that's what the rental vendor, which was Creative Technology, who provided all the gear, that was what they had. But I wasn't quite sure whether that'd be enough intensity with all the sun. So I did a base light wash all around as a 5 or 6 position, so I could raise the base illumination using Martin Vipers.
Yeah.
The Mac Vipers, which
we love the Vipers.
It's got a great kick to it. But at the stages that were outside at the lake, in addition to that, I put an HMI surround so that we can get the base illumination way up, because the sun was just brutal. And with the stadium behind bouncing off all the silver reflective surfaces, we needed to really get the illumination up at the same time, softening the light. So I needed more base illumination. That's why some of those plots have HMI surrounds. Some have moving light surrounds listed as base light, but they all have key lights that are some form of moving light, with the exception of the convention center, which was a rather small setup. And we just did it with straight Ellipse Licos, I think we used. Even when it was chosen, when the lake stage was chosen for the Olympics, we had to actually add some ARRI sky panels to the stages, because the HMIs were just too bright, as were the moving lights. We needed a softer surround, but we also added esprits, We added a dozen on scissors lifts outside just to light trees and the background of the stadium because it wasn't bright enough in the background for the nighttime coverage. But that's what drove the equipment list as it progressed.
Right. The environmental requirements. Very interesting.
Yep. And what the vendor had.
Dennis, I have a quick question. When it comes to the halftime show, is there any overlap or you just have to get out of their way?
The halftime show, which was designed, the lighting was designed by Al Gurdon, and Bruce Rogers did the scenic. They are an entity unto themselves. And essentially what happens is all of the broadcast booths have to have their lights turned off and it literally shuts down. The football show people will record it, but it's the NFL that really runs that. How the coverage is done, and even in terms of where we're allowed to put studios and booths, it's all governed by the NFL, and they're very strict about who gets permissions. The crazy thing, even, I was right on the field, right in front of the performance, because one of the anchors decided that she wanted to do an interview with Dr. Dre as soon as it was over. So I was right there, getting my insides vibrated, my ears blown out, waiting for this interview. And we were basically there, myself and my lead gaffer, with light panels to grab this interview. It was really quite a setup, but it's what they do. It's like the D-Day invasion of Normandy.
Yeah, right.
It's so
in
thought
7
out.
minutes.
oh my God. And the way everything comes out, and there's very, very strict security clearances that go on.
Sure.
Even when they rehearse for 4 days before the actual game day, they were rehearsing every night, and emails were sent out, signs were posted. If anybody was caught with a camera shooting or videotaping or taking pictures, they would be fired from the project and not allowed back and have their credentials revoked. They get very serious about this sort of thing.
So those low frequencies that you got from this halftime show, they actually moved your organs inside your body.
Oh my God. I still think I'm yelling at people because I can't hear.
I can just imagine how many subwoofers are around there. That's amazing.
Oh, well, if you saw the show, you saw them all drive out.
Oh yeah. That was pretty awesome.
And then it was an odd choice of instruments that Al Gurdon had on each one of those trucks. There was like a VL 2600 and then an Excalibur, bang, 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 alternating all the way down. And then they had those blasters that were facing it.
Right.
And then they had a whole rim of moving lights around the arena, along with, God, there must have been 14, maybe a dozen gladiator follow spots. Wow. But it was just very strangely done because it was all facing one direction.
Of course.
The whole thing faced west. If you were sitting on the east side of the stadium, you didn't see shit.
Right. Well, it was sort of like the Olympic opening ceremonies. I mean, it was
same
all
kind of thing.
It was all done for basically maybe 20% of that. Very few people who were there. It was done for television. I mean, let's be honest. You do this because 100 million people are watching it. That's why you're doing it.
But you know what? I've done a lot of shows that are live shows and broadcast. You still have a certain debt to pay to the people in the live audience, especially when the people are paying $10,000 a seat.
Well, those are the cheap seats, though. You're paying, you're showing the people in the $45,000 seats the full show, and you do have the jumbotron up there. Let me ask you a question, backing way up, back to the Olympics and your presence at the Olympics and how you have the director, I think you said, in Connecticut. Do you think this is the future? That
100%.
Okay.
I know that you guys wanted to talk about the future, and that was a note that I had made to talk about later on, but that's definitely where it was going. I talked about this at a master class I did about 2-3 years ago, and about the eventual fall of broadcasting as we know it. And the pandemic has accelerated that to the nth degree. And it has shown the world and the people that we work for, the broadcast clients that we work for, just how little they can do to still get an end product that people will watch. And that's a bit of a shame, frankly, because quality control seems to be going out the window. I mean, even the fact that, I was lighting locker rooms with light panels, and there would have been a time where at the network level, we would have a team of people in there with actual lights that we'd hang from the ceiling, and it'd be done almost like a studio. Now everything is run and gun.
Yeah. But that's the zeitgeist too, you know? I mean, I think the new generations are coming up, they want it rough. Yeah, and I think it's kind of exciting in a way. It makes our job a little more chaotic, but kind of exciting because we're adjusting. We have the tools to do it.
I sort of have a technical question for you because you talked about these heavy-duty lights and dealing with the sun. And I just did this master class that Alan Edelman did. And one of the takeaways, and I'm in the middle of the book, that Jeff Ravitz wrote with Jim Moody. And I'm just curious, like the relationship between that live audience and the camera and the use of the camera aperture and settings and trying not to change that and using the lighting to compensate different moments. So I'm curious, that was my one takeaway so far from that conversation was we really want to keep the aperture the same. What f-stop is the camera at? And in your world, in a situation like the Olympics where we had the dealing with the sun, did the camera stay and did you adapt? And because of course the sun is dynamic. So I wonder if you could maybe give our listeners a sense of what that relationship is between camera, light, aperture, and changing conditions.
The biggest, your best friend on any show that's done for broadcast television is going to be the video shader, the person who's actually balancing the cameras and adjusting the electronic f-stops, adjusting chroma, the knees, everything that you can do to make people look better on camera. Billy Steinberg, who was the chief shader, had several shaders working underneath him. Billy does big award shows like the Oscars and the Grammys, and he's a known figure in Hollywood. But he stayed in constant communication with me and the LDs who were in charge at each particular stage. In many of the stages, Billy had to use neutral density, sometimes 2 and 3 stop ND was put into the camera to bring the overall down because we don't want to take the iris down to f22 or f18. We want to still have some depth with range hovering around 5, 6, or 8. So with the combination of neutral densities and with a little bit tighter f-stop, then we would balance for that. It wasn't so much, okay, let's pull out the meter and we're going to achieve 300 foot candles to match something in the background. It's more a matter of sometimes letting the background blow out so that we can get a better image on the people while maintaining a more shallow depth of field to put them into focus. I mean, let's face it, as lighting designers, our chief job is selective focus, whether it's on a stage or in an architectural installation, a live event, and especially in broadcast. But in broadcast, that particular focus is achieved more with the camera than it is with the actual lighting. So it's important. And even when I'm doing talk shows or news shows, I always try and keep the camera as wide open as possible because nobody's tuning into the view to see the background. They're tuning in to see Whoopi Goldberg or one of the ladies in The View. That's just the way it works. When I lit the Ellen DeGeneres show, I didn't light my background to make the background the star. You light the star to make the background more pleasing to the people watching the show. So regardless of what the particular show is, you try and first get an f-stop that's going to work for you and show the proper depth of field, and then try and figure out all the parameters around it. Obviously, something like the Super Bowl with the sun setting or sun rising and the morning shows right behind us was quite a challenge. Same thing in
what f-stop did you use with the sun? Would you stopped way down and then bring the light up? Or
well, what we were trying to do was maintain a 5, 6, or an 8, and then neutral densitying from there, because then that allowed us. The video then would stay as a constant, and then we would take that we had latitude in both directions to raise and lower light intensities. You mentioned Jeff, who's also a friend of all of us, but Jeff was my lighting director on the tailgate stage.
Love it. Hey, you're talking about backgrounds, and where are we with backgrounds? I mean, are we going to eventually get to a point where there's just going to be a screen behind all the talent and we can put whatever background we want up there?
Yes.
We're doing it now, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
It's crazy. It's really kind of nuts.
The something like the Super Bowl or the Olympics, it's a story about putting anchor talent or broadcasters in the location.
Right.
So it's important to also see the location in the background, which is why going to an f-stop of F8 or 5.6 or even 11 is somewhat important. I would never, ever go to something that has that much focus in a studio. Or if you look at a news show like World News Tonight with David Muir, the f-stop is 1.8 because nobody cares about the background, but we want to make sure that the foreground or our subject is in perfect focus. It's very difficult, though, in any sporting event. If a ball is traveling at 100 miles an hour and that cameraman is following it on close-up, he's not going to be able to do it if his lens is wide open. So he needs to maintain focus, and it's too difficult with a wide open aperture. So you'll try and maintain a f11, 22, something like that for him. One of the things to remember, I mean, what we learn as lighting designers doesn't really change in whatever medium we're working in. And I mean, I'm a second generation lighting designer in broadcast. Many of us are third and fourth generation in theater, but the predecessors in the broadcast world, they really established the way it has to be, and things haven't really changed that much. A top light is always going to be a top light. A backlight is always going to be a backlight. A side light is always going to be a side light. A front light, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where we position the lights.
The cameras have changed, but the cameras have really grown.
The cameras have grown, but without any side light,
right,
it's still going to look undimensional. It's not going to have the three-dimensionality that we want. And when we're working in a medium that's two-dimensional, we need to add and create that third dimension.
Absolutely. But what's striking me as fascinating as a guy who grew up with film is, I think it was Alan was saying that they could do a handheld camera under a candle, under literally 1 foot candle, and the actors could be moving, and it's not noisy and it's not blurred, and the sensor can handle that, and that just blows me away.
Yep, which is why our jobs are going to be changing at such a drastic pace but you still need that one candle.
Sure.
I will relate something that happened to me at the Super Bowl. After the Super Bowl, the anchor, as I mentioned, couldn't get out to the Olympic stage to begin the show. So I hear on my headset, we're going to keep Mike Tirico in the arena. He'll find a place to stand. We need to get him lit. So I'm on the field with a light panel. I have a gaffer. I say, okay, come on out. Let's get this. Let's figure it all out. Steadicam goes running out to the field. We find something that's a pleasing background. He's going to go on the air. Now, there's nobody else. It's just the three of us on the field for NBC's Olympics. Now, there's about 70,000.
Nobody knows this is how it happens. This is a great story.
There's about 70,000 of my closest friends all around the arena yelling and screaming. But for the NBC Olympics, we're trying to get this happening. Now, I've got a director in my earpiece, and he's giving us guidance about what he wants. The stage manager also knows. So it's not like we're floating blind. But we did about maybe 45 minutes of ins and outs for the Olympics from the field at the 30-yard line with the trophy awards stage in the background. At one point, one of the managers came out. I'm just standing there holding a light panel. I have my gaffer holding it in the positions, and he actually took one out. So he went out with two. So I was able to get a little side light in there. So he looked better. Production manager comes out from NBC Sports and says to me, I can't believe that you're the one out here holding this light panel. He said, this is the most
so glamorous.
This is the most expensive light panel in the world. Can't you have an electrician doing this? I said, it's not the most expensive because what you're paying for is someone that knows where that light panel.
There you go.
Right.
And when you've got one light or two lights, you better find the right place.
And how did you find Mike Tirico amongst all those people?
Well, again, there's like 4 or 5 of us, but 1 million security people.
outnumbered.
It's a bit crazy. And we're wearing security vests. We got all kind of credential. It's just lunacy, all of the nonsense you have to go through.
But we don't see that. The public doesn't get any of that.
No.
We have no idea of the chaos at all.
Nope.
I was just going to say what you said before about the cameras getting so much more sophisticated and the difference between how over the years video and lighting have sort of changed intensity as well. When those LED walls first came in and were used on television, you had to make sure the lighting was high enough. The video was high enough to cut through the lighting, and now it's sort of the other way around. And also, when HDTV came in, everybody was like, oh my God, the lighting is really going to change because of what the camera sees, and it sees every little defection on imperfection on people's faces. And some people have, 84-inch televisions in their living room, and other people were watching the Super Bowl on their iPhone. So you don't even know what your audience is looking at anymore.
No. It's really problematic. And I had this discussion several years ago with Bill Klages. I mean, God created the earth, if you follow that whole theory, in 7 days. And then he finally said, and let there be light. And then Bill said, what intensity do you want?
What color temperature
this is
are
a
you thinking
guy.
about?
This is a guy who's done it all, who's been around a million years,
Absolutely.
and has been an advisor to many lighting designers like myself who came after him. But you should definitely have him on the show.
So where do you see the future of broadcast lighting headed?
The whole world of virtual reality is just leaps and bounds, and augmented reality and all sorts of phony reality. I started doing virtual reality probably about 30 years ago. When I was on staff at ABC, they were very innovative doing advanced green screen work. They had contracted the ORAD systems out of the Middle East. And they were doing, total virtual sets, but the virtual scenery will only be as good as your artists that are painting that scenery and how you use the virtual scenery. The biggest problem then was the camera technology wasn't good enough to be able to get the proper imagery, the proper depth. And if you wanted to do a tracking, sweeping shot across your virtual set, it jerked. It was very jerky in the way it laid in the imagery in the background. Technology has improved incredibly since then, but people have a tendency to think that it's going to be the be all and the end all. The reality is it's going to eliminate a lot of the scenery in the studios. It's going to eliminate a lot of big studios. I mean, we're designing studios right now for a major network that instead of having 30-foot high grids in spaces that are 100 feet by 100 feet, they're now having 16-foot high grids in spaces that are only 50 feet by 50 feet. And a lot of the studios that we're doing are just video walls all around the whole studio. And the video walls then can change the content for whatever show they're putting into that studio. From a lighting design standpoint, we're still having to light people, but we're not necessarily having to light scenery. Now, if you take it to the augmented reality level, let's say like a Mandalorian sort of project, where that reality that's created in the screens and the LED screens behind them also becomes the light source. Then what's the lighting designer actually doing if he's not necessarily having to initiate that naturalistic lighting that we used to do on a green screen set? So if we're on Mars in a green screen, if our talent is there, we would light them red or whatever the colors are. Now the LEDs are so strong and the cameras are so sensitive. The video content that's in the screens is
the light source.
Source. That's correct.
Yeah.
So now what you're doing is just merely augmenting faces, but enhancing that with hopefully lighting that is correct to what the environment is. A lot of times when I was doing early virtual reality, they would come in and say, okay, we have all the scenery done in virtual world. Now we need to light the green screen in the studio. And I'd say, but how could you have created the virtual scenery without a lighting designer designing that scenery with the scene designer. Whether you're building the scenery in a scene shop or you're building it in a virtual world on a computer, you still need to light it so that it looks realistic. And once you light it so it looks realistic, then you have to light the people that are in that virtual environment so they look like they're in that environment. If I have a virtual set that has French doors on stage right with the sun pouring in, then my talent or my actor better not have sun coming from the other direction. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it needs to
absolutely.
still look natural.
Right.
I definitely think that's really the way it's going.
Yeah.
And only because we've been doing this already for so many decades, and we're now, the technology has improved and is perfected so much that lighting needs to follow along with it.
Right.
Again, will it be, it's going to limit the number of lighting designers, and people are really going to have to be on their toes and bring their A game to the party to make sure that everything is perfect. Because let's face it, if there's something virtual and the look of the light on the person who's really the story, then that subliminal incorrect lighting will make the reader, the viewer, something will be wrong, and they can't quite put their finger on it.
Yeah, it'll take you out of it.
And that's what's really important. And it's a very difficult task. And to that end, students who are studying lighting need to really study their study of light, shadow, all the functions and qualities, and even fine art needs to be really enhanced so that they can visualize in their head what things need to be, because it's not going to be there in the studio when they walk into the studio.
And the interesting thing also is that not only do they need to understand all that, they need to learn how to see. They really need to be able to see all that in every day so that it's part of their toolbox.
I'm not seeing that anymore. I mean, I interview a lot of, in the last 2 years, we haven't hired that many new people, but I used to interview young designers all the time, and every year we'd hire a new designer right out of school. And I would routinely troll the design shows like the Hemsleys or the portfolio show that Steve does in New York or used to do in New York, and meet new talent. And one of the things that I find when I interview people virtually now on Zoom calls is they don't seem to have the understanding of visualization. And even using the word visualization, that's where it's going. They need to start learning things that we were not trained at. We weren't trained in graphics. We weren't trained in visualization.
You are absolutely right. So many students think, oh, yeah, I know what that looks like. Okay, yeah. But do you really know what it looks like? And do you know what it feels like? I mean, that really is the key. You're right. There are going to be fewer lighting designers, but they're going to have to be really, really good. And I don't know if we're set up right now educationally to train people like that.
It's interesting. Even if you look behind me, this is my office in my house.
You're old school.
Old school.
A parallel rule.
Old school. I mean, I understand Vectorworks. I understand AutoCAD. I don't do it. I have people that do it for me. But everything I do is old school, and people joke with me about it. But the reality is that's the way I was trained, and that's the way I try and train the younger people who come to me, because I find that they have started to rely on electronics and gimmicks and gags without understanding the way it really works. If you don't know how to add 2 and 2 and you rely on your laptop or your phone to do it, then someday you're not going to be able to know that 2 + 2 is 4. And it's one of those crazy things that happen. You guys talk about photography for portfolios all the time. And I know that you think the photographs don't mean anything and people could enhance the photographs. When I'm interviewing somebody for a job at LDG, I always ask them who did their photographs. Primarily because I want to know if they did them. And if they did them and the composition is lousy, then I'm not going to hire somebody that doesn't know how to compose a picture. Because what we do not only in lighting design, but especially in broadcast, is going back to that selective focus thing. And too often, I mean, I get a lot of work, not necessarily because I'm a great lighting designer, but because I do scenic design, lighting design, I've directed, I'm a musician, I've done all sorts of things that multi-variety of background that I have, I can mold into a job that people really want to have covered without hiring all those individual people. And a lot of directors I work with will send me off to do a job because they know I will set everything up for them and they just walk in and run with it. And too often, the students that I interview, they don't have a broad-based training in which they have the multifaceted aspects that are required for success. You know, they force themselves into one selective thing. There's not enough work to be a specialist anymore.
Talking about the young designers, I talk to a lot of the kids that come to LDI and, they say they want to do this or they want to do that. And I tell them to look at as many paintings, museums, art, history. So if somebody says to you, I want that light to look like it's coming through the slats of an old tobacco barn in Virginia at 5:00 on a sunny afternoon in June, what does that look like?
Bingo.
Well, I think you're all getting to the undergraduate education should be very broad-based, a liberal arts education, so that you are. Right. And if it's a theater education, like an hour BFA, they've got to take classes in all of this stuff as well as art history, right? I think that's really when you get to the graduate level, it's maybe another conversation.
Well, I think, Dennis, to get back to your point, I think it's fear that's stopping these young designers. When you say a technique or a gag or a gimmick, they're trying to find a hook that will get their foot in the door. And so, they're not sure what a designer does, and they're trying to figure that out. And so all of a sudden, they think by specializing in something or getting good at one thing, that's going to, launch their careers. It's very difficult to train them or to convince them to even risk failing in class by trying something new or challenging.
You know what, Steve? You are like 250% correct. And I don't know how to train people to do that. I remember a million years ago, I was doing a thing at the USITT that Jim Moody had organized, where they had a moving rig up, and 5 or 6 lighting designers were asked to design a scene from a Shakespearean play, and you were given like 15 or 20 minutes to do it. And the students who were part of that watched you do it, and then they had actors come in and you did the scene. So you lit it, then they did a scene, everybody watched it, everybody critiqued it. The designers were given a certain amount of time to choose the scene they wanted and then design it and then go using the moving rig to set it up. I said, I don't want to know. I don't want to even have any knowledge of what's there. Because at that time I was doing soap operas and I would walk into a studio at 1:00 in the morning with a certain amount of knowledge of what the blocking was going to be. But by the time we left at the end of the day, it was 180 degrees different. So one of the things that I learned very quickly was how to think on your feet. And at that particular thing that Jim did, I went in and everybody was doing their thing. And I said, okay, somebody pick a scene. Somebody tell me what the scene they want me to light, and I will go and do it. And that's exactly what I did. Fortunately, I got the witches scene from Macbeth, and what could be more fun? Right. But I mean, I just went out there and wung it, as they say. And it's funny, I remember the cauldron. I didn't, it's a fire, it's a thing. So I said to one of the students, run down to the floor, tell Joe Tywheel that Dennis Size wants a couple Great American flicker generators and get some orange gel. And I said, we're going to just put a fire in this cauldron. So they were down there, but I only had 15 minutes. So essentially, we did the whole thing. I lit some moving lights. We had some moving stuff going back and forth. But anyhow, they come out. The witches are there. But the kid comes back with the stuff from Great American Market, And I said, okay, we got and the judge is saying, okay, you got 30 seconds left. So I took all this shit that he brought up. I threw it in the cauldron. We plugged it in and the lights were flickering. It was the best gimmick you could have done. The witches played the whole scene with all this flickering light and then moving clouds. After it was over, I was criticized by several of the lighting designers for letting students think that it could be that easy. But one of the things I said, I need to make people realize that we have to think fast on our feet. And we can't be afraid to make whatever choices we think are best to the best interest of the project at whole.
And sometimes easy is good. Easy is good.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who the hell cares?
When you look at that holy trinity and you drop the name of Bill Klages as someone who can think on his feet, you also have to throw out that name Emmy Ferrantino, and you have to throw out that name Marilyn Lowry.
Yes,
and
indeed.
They can all think on their feet. And it's funny because you watch them work. I mean, I was at Wide World of Sports, and I would watch them work, and it would be they made it look easy. They made it look easy because they could think on their feet, and if something didn't work, they could turn on a dime.
Yep, it's interesting. You know, you always have to keep growing and changing. And at LDG, one of the secrets to our 30 plus years is as the industry changes, we change with it. And several years ago, when LEDs started to come in, we kind of refashioned ourselves as the go-to company for LED and energy efficient lighting. And we have a very strong systems and facilities division that does studios all around the world. But we did a master class for the industry at Screen Gem Studio in New York. This is about maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I was the designer who was doing all the stuff. Our equipment department was bringing in the gear, and we were basically just doing a shoot off. And there were maybe 70 or 80 industry people there. One of the people there was Emmy. And during the break, I went over to Emmy. I said, Emmy, you're like, the godfather of lighting. What the hell are you doing here listening to my bullshit? And he said, no matter how old and how much work you do in this business, you can always learn something new. And I always remember that, because what on earth could he possibly learn from me? But at the same time, we all learn from each other. I mean, that's the great thing about your show. There's not a single show of yours that I listen to that I don't learn at least one or two new things that I didn't know before.
That's
Were they worth remembering?
Yeah, really.
Don't tune in next week.
I just had a conversation about this and about education with Cliff Taylor. You had him on the show, and he was talking about the Studio School of Design that he and Mark Stanley started. I mean, I just was so, again, because of your show, was so thrilled by what he was doing and feel that really is the way of the future to educate our students in design, that I called him up, and we now have established the Lighting Design Group Scholarship at the Studio School of Design, specifically geared for diversity. And every year, a student will be given a scholarship to attend an academic year at Studio School of Design, because the education is so important. And what he's doing, what he and Mark are doing, and all of the designers and instructors that are working with them, I think will train our students better than the more rigid training and discipline training that they get at the university level. And I don't mean to denigrate what you guys are doing.
We struggle. We push against it. So
totally. I mean, I taught broadcast lighting at Carnegie Mellon for several years, and it was a struggle. And usually, what I would do, because I was working, I'd only show up 2 days a week, every alternate week, and I just taught grad students in television lighting. But I would take those students to New York for a couple of weeks on their own, and it's a grad level class. So you're talking 3 or 4 people max. And I would immerse them in television lighting that all my friends were doing, whether it was a soap opera, a talk show, a news show, so that they could see and experience the way that other designers work in the industry, because they learn a lot more that way than they were going to learn in the classroom at Carnegie Mellon.
Well, Dennis, we want to thank you for being with us today.
This is fantastic.
I mean, what a great,
really interesting.
God, we wish we could do this for another hour. We'll have you back. That's what we're going to do. We'll definitely
We
have
didn't
you
talk
back.
about any of the different media that you wanted to talk about.
I know, but we not everybody drives, have an hour and a half drive to work. We try to keep the show around 45 minutes, but we will definitely have you back, my friend.
Absolutely.
And can you indulge me for another 45 seconds while I read something?
Absolutely.
I have this. No. This is something that hangs on the wall of my office. And it has a special meaning to me because much like yourself, David, I was in the time of your life when I was in college.
Oh, my God. Wait, how do you know I was in the time of your life? That's nuts.
Hey, I memorized every single show that you've had.
Okay.
No, it just kind of stuck out because you had talked about it once.
Right.
And you played Wesley, the piano player.
Absolutely, yeah.
As did I in college.
Unbelievable.
And then I was a dancer. I started out as a dancer when I was a kid, but the director wanted me to then play the dancer. So I had to teach the guy he hired as Wesley how to play the piano. And then I played, anyway, that's immaterial to the thing. But if you remember, at the end of the time of your life, William Saroyan, 1939 Broadway show, had an epigraph. Would that be the right word? I think it's epilogue, whatever.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, it has meant something to me for 50 years to the point that I have it hanging in my office. I'd just like to read it for all the students that you have. In the time of your life, live, so that in that good time there shall be no ugliness or death for yourself or for any life your life touches. Seek goodness everywhere. When it is found, bring it out of its hiding place and let it be free and unashamed. Discover in all things that which shines and is beyond corruption. Encourage virtue in whatever heart it may have been driven into secrecy and sorrow by the shame and terror of the world. Ignore the obvious, for it is unworthy of the clear eye and the kindly heart. Be the inferior of no man, or of any man be superior. Remember that every man is a variation of yourself. No man's guilt is not yours, nor is any man's innocence a thing apart. In the time of your life, live, so that in that wondrous time you shall not add to the misery and sorrow of the world, but you shall smile to the infinite delight and mystery of it. And for 50 years, I read that almost every day.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
Of course, Saroyan wrote that because World War II was impending, and there was a lot of premonition about Nazis and the Jewish Holocaust and whatnot. But it certainly applies at this time that we're living in today.
It does.
Yeah, it does.
And thank you for giving me that extra minute to read
beautiful. That's beautiful. And I remember hearing that.
It's important to say
every night on the show, at the end of the show, just listening to that. And it's a message that we all need.
Important to put those words in everyone's ears.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot, Dennis, for coming.
Hey, one more question.
Sure, what's that?
Go ahead, buddy.
At the end of the theme song, somebody says, nice.
Yes.
Who is that?
Oh, that was actually me.
Was it?
That was you?
That's me,
okay.
It didn't sound like any of you, so I was wondering who was.
Actually, my nephew.
It was like an old Beatles thing.
Yeah, well, it was weird. It did happen. It was actually, it was originally my nephew, and I said it in the background. So I guess it's both of us, really. So we once had a baby singing on our damn theme song.
Oh, did you hear that one with the baby? That was great.
We got to put that back in. But anyway, thank you again, Dennis. We're definitely going to have you back. And the next time you're in LA, please give me a call. All right?
Will do. I might be out for the Oscar post show. I'm not sure yet.
Excellent. Well, I'll take you to an even better restaurant than we went to. Okay.
My treat.
Okay, you got it. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, livedesignonline.com, Amazon Prime Music, and just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to the podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate, the law firm of Flecht, Flocked, Flair, and Glare and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers and Sister, coming to you from Valencia, California, New York City, Gainesville, Florida, beautiful St. Bart's, and the Republic of Texas.
And be sure to join us next week where we chat about more useless things and explore the crazy shenanigans in our industry.
This was useful.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So once again, we'd like to thank our friend Dennis Size for joining us today. And we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Toodles.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dennis. This was great.
You're welcome.